Welcome back to the Data Driven Real Estate Podcast, the podcast for real estate professionals dedicated to driving business using data. I'm Aaron Norris with Property Radar, and this is episode 38. Today we have David Tresrudian and Helen Fowler with Retrofit One. They're a design build firm here in Southern California, but they actually operate all over California, helping commercial owners and multifamily owners look at the advantage of accessory dwelling unit in combination with retrofitting with soft buildings. I never even heard of the term. A lot of people talk about ADUs when it comes to single family, but wait till you hear what's possible with commercial. That and much more. Don't miss the show. Welcome back to the Data Driven Real Estate Podcast. Today we have David Tresrudian and Helen Fowler with Retrofit One, and I'm very excited to talk about commercial accessory dwelling units. We've covered residential in a few different ways with Christy Sirtwell, and then a little bit with Ward Hannigan, but nobody's talking about commercial. So David and Helen, thank you so much for joining us. How the heck did you get into accessory dwelling units?
So
I can.
Oh, never mind.
David, you want to go?
I was gonna say I'll defer to Helen because she was really the one in our company that spearheaded this division. So yeah, let us know, Helen.
So hi again. Thank you so much, Aaron. I'm Helen. And as Aaron mentioned, we are with Retrofit One, as well as now a special division just dedicated to ADUs called ADU One, very appropriate. And so ADU One came to be similarly to our Retrofit One division. ADU One was kind of born right on time of when California passed the state law for ADUs, accessory dwelling units, which is primarily to increase housing, because there is a housing shortage across California. So they really expanded it now to multifamily properties, which is really cool because everybody kind of identified ADUs connected with single family residents, typical garage conversions. But what's really awesome for commercial properties and multifamily property owners, they are now allowed to expand their own property, increase the value of their property, add monthly income, and increase the number of units. So ADU One was developed because of the high demand we were getting from our retrofit clients, because you can also combine those two together. So we were getting a lot of demand all around to combine the retrofitting requirements with the development of ADUs and really just kind of maximize their money, return on investments, instead of only spending money on retrofits. So with that came ADU One.
Excellent. And some people may not understand what retrofitting, exactly what you do. And I know about that only because I go to the Apartment Owners Association events several times a year, and I often see, the lineup of all the vendors. And that's where I was introduced to the first concept of retrofitting. But what does that mean to you, and who is Retrofit One?
Yeah, I can answer that part. So the city of Los Angeles had adopted this ordinance requiring buildings who own these buildings that have tuck under and sort of carport style parking with weak soft story lines and units above to sort of reinforce those parking areas and the building in that weak soft story line to ensure that it doesn't collapse in the event of an earthquake. And the city of Los Angeles actually followed in the steps of the city of San Francisco, which adopted a similar ordinance in 2013. So essentially, all these buildings across the area in Los Angeles, and now a couple other cities such as Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, and Pasadena are requiring landlords to retrofit these soft story buildings. And the retrofit typically entails the installation of steel moment frames, steel columns, shear walls with new foundations and things like that. And it's really interesting because buildings, soft story buildings have been identified not only by these couple of jurisdictions that I mentioned, but also by the state as a sort of peril to life. And a lot of you might remember that back during the time of the Loma Prieta earthquake in 1989, I think it was, and the Northridge earthquake in 1994 that followed shortly after that. There were a lot of these soft story buildings that collapsed, and there was a tremendous loss of life. So the state has taken a vested interest in not only protecting life, but also protecting property and ensuring that in the event of a catastrophic earthquake, these soft story buildings, which, I mean, there are tons. There are like tens of thousands, if not 100,000 across the state of California, that they don't fail. And the real economic impact of a failure of all of these soft story buildings during the event of an earthquake is that there will no longer be enough housing in California, and that'll be detrimental to the economy. So we saw an opportunity to retrofit these buildings. Like I said, it's mandated here in Los Angeles, and it's been a great business. But slowly but surely, these buildings are being retrofit, and we sort of dovetailed into the ADU space because it's just a natural sort of combination of our skills and abilities.
Well,
right now.
Let's go back before the ADU law. So before 2017, there was just talking about ADUs. And when somebody was looking at a retrofit, let's just say, I don't know, you've got an apartment building with the tuck under parking. How much would it cost to stabilize that parking? Like, how much are we talking about to make parking more? I have no concept.
Yeah, it really depends on the size of the building and the size of the tuck under parking area. So your retrofit can run you anywhere between probably $35,000, $40,000 at the very low end, where you don't even require steel, and you can just do it with shear walls, all the way up to $550,000, $600,000 for these large sprawling communities that are just built atop these sticks and posts.
Right.
So it can get very expensive very quick.
So before the ADU law, you were just spending that kind of money just to make sure the building was secure, but no extra income. You were just making the investment.
Exactly.
So Helen, did you get really excited when the ADU law came out?
Of course. Personally, I really liked it because in a way I kind of felt bad for the property owners that suddenly have this ordinance slapped on them. And especially the owners who maybe they only have one building and this is their source of income to live, and it's their livelihood, and suddenly they have to pay $80,000 to retrofit it. So I always felt really bad in those situations. Of course, we're here to help and we're a business, but whenever I would talk with the property owners, I could hear how difficult it would be to have to spend this money, get nothing back. Of course, the safety of their residents and tenants and the building. But it was always a tough situation to have to present this ordinance. Sometimes we were the first people to tell them that they have to do this. So I was really excited that it can now be combined with something that can get them a return on their investment, make them more money, and help the housing shortage and just the economy and the community with housing at the same time. So it really resonated better with me this time that it's helping in so many ways rather than somebody just spending money for the sake of meeting the requirements.
So let's go back up real quick, and just in case somebody's landing on this video and they're like, what are they talking about, ADU? So accessory dwelling units are just secondary units typically. A lot of times it's thrown around a lot more in the residential space where it can look like a converted garage, which is a junior accessory dwelling unit. It can be attached and share a wall. It can be a completely separate structure. And by law, the state came down and said, no more games. Local zoning, you're out. By right, you in California have the right, if you're a landowner, to build an accessory dwelling unit. And it set some guidelines. The setbacks changed. What's some other things? They finally updated it to where there's a maximum height level. Early legislation had no cap, so technically you have a 10-story ADU in the backyard. They fixed that. One of the biggest things is that they made them, you don't have to be an owner occupant, which is great. A lot of cities were also roped in because they were charging really ridiculous fees, impact fees. Some cities were charging up to $50,000 in impact fees that had nothing to do with anything besides, you want to build one, 50 grand. They were setting lot size limits like, oh, an ADU, sorry, you don't have a 20,000 square foot lot. So the state has continually come down and regulated this. It's been fascinating to watch. But commercial ADUs don't get enough conversation. So can you talk a little bit about the ordinance of what it allows in the state of California for commercial?
Yeah, sure. I can continue with that. So pretty much kind of a blanketed rule all across California right now for multifamily properties. You're allowed to create up to 25% of your existing number of units, and that counts for attached. So that would be converting space within the existing footprint. Garages, if they're already attached, the tuck under parking, as we described, storage rooms, rec rooms, passageways, basements. So any room that's within the existing dwelling, you can create up to 25% of your existing number of units. And then a flat rate across the board is up to 2 detached units. And that would be, you could either have, again, a simple conversion of a detached garage, detached carport, even sheds, barns they're allowing, as long as it was an existing accessory structure. Or you can do brand new construction, detached, space permitting, following all of the setback rules and height limits.
25%. That's interesting. Can you convert existing square footage? Like maybe you had a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, and you want to split them into 1 and 1. Will that work? Or this has to be converted space?
For the ADU law, they're pretty much sticking to space that was before uninhabited.
Okay. So some of these fancy buildings who created a lot of amenities that people weren't using a lot, especially now during COVID, the movie rooms, oversized gyms, you can convert those into livable spaces. That's really interesting.
Right, if they're within the proper zoning.
Okay, and I think another really interesting thing about commercial is that you're typically located, a very specific part of the rule is that you don't have to replace parking if you're within a half a mile of public transit. That still stands, correct?
Yep, exactly.
That's fantastic. And a lot of multifamily that almost by the very nature of the type of zoning, cities typically, you're, more oftentimes than not, most commercial, does it fit into that category?
Exactly. We have yet to, at least with all of the customers and clients I've been working with personally, they're all within hundreds of feet to a bus stop.
Is it just bus stop? It's funny. I interviewed Senator Wachowski a couple years ago, and I just come back from the Consumer Electronics Show where the LA Department of Transportation showed off their multimodal stuff that they were doing. And I asked him, do those bikes count? And you know, those scooters, if they're on the corner?
Mhm.
And he's like, I haven't thought about that.
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure either, but I know it's not just bus stop. It's ride share systems, anything else. So that may possibly work.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've experienced this. I don't mean to throw local planning under the bus, but in your experience, are they very forthcoming with that information? Or will they tell owners like, yeah, you can't do that?
I would say right now, luckily, California, because it's a state law, it supersedes any, local jurisdiction. However, it is still very new. So some cities with their own, they may be in the process of developing their own ordinance. Santa Clarita, for example, their ADU ordinance just passed in January and went into effect over the weekend. So prior to that, they kind of had a gray area for ADU submission, but now they finally finalized everything. So they're, of course, within the parameters that they're even able to have wiggle room. So many cities right now, if they don't have their own ordinance, they have to follow California. And if they do have their own ordinance, it's still within certain requirements and restrictions that California put on.
Are you experiencing timelines that the law states the city has, or county, the building department has 60 days to approve a permit? Are you seeing in the COVID environment that is holding true?
I believe so. We haven't had any issues so far with at least like the first rounds or anything like that. It's been okay.
Okay. Do you see any specific building types that it just works so well for? Be it large apartment buildings or these smaller complexes? Any ideas?
It definitely works for the tuck under, the dingbat style that, just has those areas, easy conversion. It's already kind of part of the footprint. I've seen a huge benefit for duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, because they can almost double their unit count. And typically those buildings, because they're smaller, they have extra lot and land, that has been just empty space. So they've been able to really capitalize on the detached units. We've seen some too any buildings, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, all the way up to buildings that have, larger storage rooms that they want to convert, tuck under maybe around the entire perimeter. That can use that, and because they have extra parking lot or the street is okay for parking. So we really haven't encountered any buildings where it wouldn't, unless they never had parking to begin with and there's no existing extra lot or land.
Yeah, I created this word called the cram lord. Don't be a cram lord. So was very excited to talk to you because of the design side, the livability. In some cities where you're working, the concept of, you make the building a little bit less livable. I think of some parts of LA where parking is already just a trauma, trying to find it. And then you get rid of existing parking and you make a really terrible living experience for the tenants, and it actually could impact the value of your property. Are those conversations you're having to have with some building owners that see the opportunity, but it's just not the right opportunity for where they're at?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I've discussed numerous times with the property owners if they're building, if it would be worth it with them or create more of a headache or issue. Especially, we definitely understand that taking away parking or providing a unit without parking may, if for them it's harder to fill, then they know that specific building might not be right for them. However, there's other buildings that if they know most of their tenants are using bikes, using public transportation, a high walkability score, it's a great opportunity. Nor do the owners have to use all of their parking, and they can also take advantage of stuff we've designed, 2-story structures. If they have kind of like a parking lot or even just a row of parking, following setback rules, we can build a 2-story structure that preserves parking underneath and has units on top. So we have many design ways to either preserve their parking, not use up all the spaces if they, don't want to, just convert storage areas, or some configuration that could help for what's best for that specific property.
I love that. So an investor contacted me about a triplex he owned, and it was on a rather large lot. And what he decided to do is add 3 garage units with ADUs on top. And just so you know, for the sake of public records, this is a triplex plus 3 ADUs. Mm-hmm. He rented the garages out to the different owners. It didn't matter, out of the 6, you just paid extra for the garage. I thought that was so brilliant. He was able to add quality of life and not get rid of parking. I just thought that was really great. I love the concept of in public record, looking at the zoning. So something already zoned like R3 or LA R3. So triplex, and right now there's still only a single family. Somebody's never come in and done highest and best use. So I've got investors specifically looking for that, and then adding the ADUs on top of adding 2 additional units. So going from a single family home to adding 5 additional units in markets like this where it's hard to maybe find a deal, you create it. That's really cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think I was showing David that yesterday, sort of some fun ways to look at the public records, and you just happen to be doing the commercial the commercial building right next door to the lot that I pulled up. That was so funny. So are there
the one on Clark? Yes.
Isn't that weird? What a small world.
Yeah.
On the Apartment Owners Association, you had 2 projects specifically I would love to bring up. One was the C-shaped building, where there's 2 streets on either side of the building, and there was tuck under parking on either side of the street. And I think what was so brilliant about that project is not only did you create 2 brand new 2-bedroom, 1 bath, I believe, but there was a courtyard in the center that you replaced the parking on site, which I thought was so great. And then the whole retrofitting angle. So typically that building owner would have to spend $150,000 to fix the undertuck parking. Is that fair?
Maybe not that much, but probably close to $70,000 to do the retrofit in both the front and in the back.
How much did it cost to convert those? Do you have any rough estimate?
So I think
project.
Yeah, the 2 units. I think the 2 units there is a total of I want to say 1,100 square feet, and we came in a little bit over 300. And in that neighborhood, each door was selling for about $275. So, yeah, exactly. They're paying $150 for the door, and, instantly the equity goes up per door by $250,000 to $275,000. So it's like a no-brainer, basically.
In your experience, when building owners are also tackling these kind of large projects, are they also doing other maintenance on the building at the same time?
A lot of times we're upgrading the sewer lines because we'll run a camera and we'll show we're licensed plumbers. So we do a lot of the plumbing work. We'll either repipe the entire building for the owner, because they'll realize like, hey, I'm doing this invasive construction. They're putting in this great new product called PEX, and it's solving all the problems they're having with pinhole leaks in their copper. So rather than just having 2 units that are sort of insulated from future failures by copper, they decide to repipe the whole building. And then we'll run a camera to find the existing sewer line, so we can tie in the new sewer to that, and they'll find that it's cracked in 4 or 5 different places. So rather than waiting for the entire sewer line to collapse, we'll just do a liner, and we'll upgrade the sewer line for another 50 to 75 years.
Wow, that's
lots of value add.
Lots of value add. And real briefly, let's talk about if there's money available. Early on in retrofitting, I heard that there was money and grants available for building owners because the city was very worried if there was a massive earthquake that they would be short a lot of inventory. Is that money still around?
I wish. No. not that we've seen.
Okay.
Quite frankly, no.
Well, and is the ordinance really at the city level? You mentioned state and then local. On your website, I saw that there were several areas specifically you have ordinances. So the city can have their own ordinance?
Yes. So it's at the city level now, at the municipality level. And there are several municipalities. Like I'm saying, San Francisco is really the pioneer of the soft story retrofit requirements. And then it sort of migrated its way down to Los Angeles. I think in San Francisco, there are maybe 3,000 buildings subject to the ordinance. Los Angeles was closer to 12. Santa Monica maybe had 2,000. The city of West Hollywood and Beverly Hills maybe 800 each, 500 in Pasadena. Now other cities such as Oakland and I think Mountain View is looking at it. They're sort of adopting the ordinance as well, but it's an issue that's sort of has been brought to the attention to legislators statewide. So there's a provision in the government code that states that these kind of buildings are a hazard to health and safety. I can't recall what it is off the top of my head, but it's there in the government code. And there was a congressman down here out of Burbank who tried to get the state to prepare a statewide inventory of soft story buildings so that the local municipalities can take a look at an ordinance. But that was shot down because I think it was something like I can't recall why it wasn't signed by Governor Brown in 2018. I think it reached his desk, but he refused. He didn't sign it. It might be coming back again, but it's definitely on people's minds, on the minds of the legislature, because they want to make sure in the event of a catastrophic earthquake, we don't run out of housing for people, because I would imagine there are millions of people living in these kind of units.
Not only that,
buildings rather.
Short, depending on who you talk to, 1.5 to 3 million, units. So yeah, the last thing we need is existing units to disappear and make the problem worse. Yes,
that's right.
So,
it would have it's sort of a domino effect, right? If people can't live in California, they're not going to be able to work in California. If you can't work in California, the state's GDP by definition is going to, decline. It's going to be very difficult to get us back on our feet after the event of an earthquake if people can't live and work.
I always encourage real estate investors to get very local, go to the municipality, check the building department, check with your utility. Sometimes if you're doing upgrades, sometimes they get these grants from national or the state that they have to spend. My favorite was when retrofitting was around, I called AOA. I was like, do you know about this insulation program that the LADWP has, where they're just giving away commercial insulation? They just have to spend the money and they're having a hard time. So while you're doing a retrofit, you can re-insulate your building and then tap into the utility to get rebates on things like windows or air conditioners or things like that. And he's like, nope, didn't know about it. So you never know when those kind of resources change. So that's why I was asking about the retrofit money. And since it is a local ordinance, if these ordinances come with money sometimes, doesn't sound like that's happening, especially with COVID.
No, definitely. But there are grants available for single family homes that want to retrofit their foundations. And that's through the Earthquake Brace and Bolt program. I've personally taken advantage at my house. And the last couple of earthquakes, I really haven't felt much, because my foundation is now bolted to the ground. And it's a really interesting process. It'll save you a lot of money in the long run in case there is an earthquake, because it prevents your structure from sliding off of the foundation.
Oh, wow. I've heard of
Yeah.
the Bolt program, but I didn't know it came with money. That's interesting. Where do you even find
Up
that?
to $3,000 for single family owners.
How much does it cost to get it done?
The average, I would say, anywhere between 6 to 10,000, depending on the size of the property. So
Wow.
you can get, up to 50% back, which is really helpful.
It is very helpful. And then also you could probably get a discount on insurance, I would think. Somewhere.
Yeah, a lot of our earthquake retrofit customers are doing it in order to get a discount on their insurance. But not only that, a lot of people are forced to retrofit their buildings, soft story buildings, because of bank requirements. So if they're going through a refinance, the lender is going to want you to retrofit your building in order to ensure that their collateral is still around, in the event of an earthquake.
Interesting.
So rather than doing that when you're doing rather than retrofitting when you're refinancing, we've got a client right now who just purchased a set of buildings. They have to retrofit these buildings in order to comply with the terms of their loan. But instead of doing that, he's just creating new units. He's putting the ADUs in and retrofitting at the same time.
That's amazing. I had no idea. So you have lenders saying we're going to go ahead and pass until you do the retrofit?
Yes.
Yeah, very often. Very often.
Wow.
More so now. Yeah, it's more so now.
Are you getting a sense that these landlords are just done and they're leaving, or they want to take on this retrofit, or are they looking to sell? Like, how are they feeling about all this?
The majority are doing it,
Okay.
because they want to keep it still worth it to do the retrofit. They pay for it once, but then they still, of course, continue to get the income from their income property. So the majority of our clients and customers and everybody else, they're doing the retrofitting. Every now and then there is somebody who does have to sell their building, and that's what I personally hate when that happens. So I really try to connect them with every single financial resource I can to help them, or we do, of course, with whatever is in our power to help, so they don't have to sell something that's their only income, based on this. But the majority are doing it, and now we notice from all of those categories, the ones who were able to do it, the ones who had to sell, the ones who did financing, are jumping on board with the ADUs, because it's almost like that's the answer they were looking for. If I'm going to spend this money, how can I do it in a way where I at least get something in return and it doesn't just hurt me in so many ways?
I bet you get this question a lot. If I have a building that's currently under rent control, will the accessory dwelling units fall under the rent control, or because of the new certificate of occupancy, I can charge market rents?
So from my understanding,
I can answer that.
Sure, you go for it, David.
Oh yeah, sorry. Thanks. So I would just like to start off with a caveat that I would engage your own legal counsel to give you an opinion. But our understanding and our experience thus far has been that these are new units, right? And these new units are exempted from Costa-Hawkins and the local municipalities' rent control requirements for, I think it's the 15 years that you have for a new construction. So it falls within that. But again, I would just encourage somebody who's looking at doing this to get legal advice from qualified counsel on that.
That could really help a lot of landlords who have maybe been very gracious or silly and not raising rents. I fall under that category because I enjoy my tenants and I like them to stay a really long time. I'm not very aggressive on that front, but where maybe they're locked in and they're a little scared and they're looking at this huge bill. This is such a neat way to increase income if you have to do those kind of things. So I hope we're right. That is my understanding as well, that you do not have to chart. It's not under the rent control, but I like that. Speak with your attorney. It's a very good idea.
Yes.
And it's a little different for a single family too, because rent control doesn't count for single family residences. But if they were to add ADUs, that could then make them a multifamily property. They may be subject to rent control there that they weren't prior.
Interesting. I didn't think
so it's also something, like David mentioned, I think every person needs to double check and do their own due diligence to make sure, because there is there's state rent control, especially as local rent control. So there's some differences there with how it's affected.
Good point. Please go down to the local level and do your homework. When it comes to builder code for commercial, when you're converting these spaces, any insights on things like solar, sprinkler systems? Are there any surprises that you've found that people aren't expecting?
Yes. So there is, with the Title 24, newly constructed detached units do have to have solar.
Okay.
You can either put the solar on the new unit or on the primary dwelling. It's up to the owner, but they will be subjected to those energy efficiency standards, and that is required for newly constructed detached units.
So you're telling me if I figure out a way to attach a wall, I may not have to have solar?
Possibly. We would have to see kind of how rigid and detailed they are with what they consider, detached or not. But
but a detached unit, like Helen is saying, is going to have to be at least 6, sometimes 10 feet away from the existing structure. So you probably won't be able to get away with that.
All right. I'm just trying to be creative. Our crew, and I'm also trying to think in the data that we have access to how to spot these things. I called the chief appraiser for Riverside County asking how they were adding these in the realm of public records, and they are, but it's not getting done correctly countywide, at least in Riverside County. So I think we're a ways away from not communicating with people that might have these. So how do we suss that out? I don't know, but do you have any favorite cities that you really enjoy because it's just so easy to do these and they're really excited about these?
Los Angeles.
Really?
The reason I like Los Angeles is because Los Angeles is very gracious in the square footage rather, of the detached ADUs that they're allowing. So the state minimum is anywhere between 800 and 850 square feet that the municipality has to allow. Some municipalities are very stingy and they'll only allow you the state minimum. But the city of Los Angeles, again, has been very gracious to property owners and is allowing a full 1,200 square feet. So you could add up to 2 1,200 square foot detached units on your property. That's like a 2,400 square foot house, essentially. It's cut in half. 3-bedroom, 2-bath, very spacious. And in most parts of the city, you're commanding $3,000 a month rent for that unit.
On each?
So it's very nice.
Oh. Each?
No,
Huh?
on each. Yeah, 1,200 square feet, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. Can you imagine?
yeah,
Well,
if not more, Santa Monica, tiny little studios can be $2,000 a month.
it's just, man, rents are very crazy these days. But what a cool strategy, and I'm so glad we're covering this in a unique way. One of the other, when I watched your AOA presentation, one of the projects I absolutely loved was the concept of the 2-story ADU, and the height limitation in the law is 16 feet high, correct? So
Yes.
yeah, you're like, do I build a really short garage? Like, how do I do that? And I'll let you take it over. That particular project was really neat, and how you got around that.
Yeah, the engineering is pretty novel on that. So the idea is that the 16-foot height limit is measured within 5 feet, is measured from the grade within 5 feet from the structure. So you can actually excavate portions of the building, portions of the lot, in order to accommodate for a taller building. So if you can get down like 1.5 feet or 2, that's enough to provide you with an extra foot or 2 to get a taller ceiling, for example, on the second floor. So the parking requirement is that you only have to have 7 feet head clearance in the parking lot. That's fine. You have to have a minimum of 7'6", typically in the dwelling area. So with that additional foot that you excavate, 1.5 feet, you've got plenty more room up in the living area to give it a nice, bright, open, and airy feel.
That is so great.
Yeah, it's great.
Very novel way to approach it. And what's the minimum square footage how do I ask this question? The minimum square footage you need to build something of substance. I don't know how to ask it.
An efficiency unit, believe it or not, is 150 square feet. Some jurisdictions have a different maximum. Helen told me that recently, that the city of Santa Monica requires at least 220 square feet. But man, if you can get away with 150 square feet with a hot plate and a place to prepare your food, and I think an area for a small fridge and bathroom facilities, you are good to rent.
Wow. So you could almost turn every garage into its own efficiency unit underneath if you have enough units.
Yeah, let's say a garage. I mean, typical parking spots right now are I think, 8 feet minimum by 18 feet in depth, but a lot of times you see them 8 feet by 20. So if you got an 8 foot by 20 spot and there's two spots right next to each other, technically you could put two tiny micro units in there.
Hey, listen, I lived in New York City. You don't have to tell me twice. People will rent that all day long. Yeah,
Just
absolutely.
have to say, similar to Manhattan closets.
Well,
I'm sort of thinking out loud here. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off here, but I'm sort of thinking out loud. Let's say, for example, the state starts providing grants to alleviate the homelessness problem that we're having all over the place. You can just make a ton of these micro units in these tuck under parking spots of people's buildings. And if the city is giving out $800,000 a month in grants to house, the previously homeless, that's amazing. I mean, you can get like, I don't know, 10 units in your building at 150 square feet a pop, and add 10,000 bucks a month to your rent roll. I mean, that's unheard of.
have you heard any cities doing some variants for this very thing that we're talking about? Now, I know there's going to be some government strings attached, like if you take money or they do a variance for you, you're going to get something recorded. But do you know of any cities saying, yeah, if you're willing to build affordable units, you can go small and we'll let you build more?
They're similarly, maybe they encompass what you're describing. There actually are a lot of grants and programs right now, maybe not specifically to funding for homelessness and housing, but there are, if you make enough units for the low income population, there are some programs and grants there. I know San Diego may have some, and some cities up north. I forgot if it was Oakland or Alameda or something like that. But there are some funding and programs right now if you do create units for low income, as well as I believe even middle income to low income. There's some funding. And I know I was helping a very nice lady right now in San Diego. She rents all of her properties to veterans, Section 8, wounded warriors, things like that. So I've been trying to help her link to programs that can help fund her ADUs because she's doing so much for her community. So there are some, if anybody needs to talk to us, I'm happy to help try to connect with any possible funding out there that can help the community.
Absolutely. I love the creativity. And it's often something I like to tell people is don't rule out the nonprofit space. So a lot of investors don't always live in the county where they own property. Go to the county 211 and start asking for those kind of programs, housing programs, and call it nonprofits and say, are you getting creative? What kind of funding is available? Because believe me, the nonprofit space is on it. They're doing some research. They're starting more housing programs. The 211 has data in almost every county in California. If it's like Riverside County, housing for the last 5 years that I've been looking at the data is always housing related. People needing help with rent and stuff like that. So
absolutely. And hopefully if there's enough push, they'll create programs and funding for it as the ADUs continue to roll out.
in residential, I know it's a much more popular conversation. It doesn't have to be stick built. So manufactured housing in some cities are even allowing tiny homes. Does that cross over into commercial as well?
Yes, I believe they allow mobile tiny homes, they're called. There's of course its own restrictions with what they look like, sizing, stuff like that. They can't have their own power just to leave. Certain stuff has to be hidden underneath, but that is one of the categories that they're allowed in many areas.
So if you landowners or commercial owners that have to do a major retrofit, maybe you can bring some of these units online and not completely be without income while you're doing some big retrofits too. I love it.
Yeah, I really like the manufactured space. We've got a manufactured. Yeah, we work with a partner, Abode, and what they're doing is they are manufacturing these 600 square foot ADUs, and we're just doing the site work and plopping them on people's land property, and that's done in like a month. You know, it's very quick in and out.
Wow, that is fast. Yeah. And what do these things look like? 600 square feet. That's a nice size.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, you can go check out their website. I think it's abodeu.com, and you can take a look at the sizing, the styling. They're just fantastic, and it's quick and easy in and out, and you have a unit, and you can put these onto commercial spaces as well.
I definitely think the plant manufactured housing is going to have its heyday. We just don't have enough skilled labor out here. Have you guys been facing a lot of increases in labor costs and supply chain?
Oh yeah.
Oh, like you wouldn't believe.
I built,
Yeah,
so I know.
we pay our guys well too, so it's like it starts to add up after a
Well,
while.
especially if you want to keep them, right? So you got to stay competitive. And you're in a
Yes,
hot market. My goodness.
I think
that's
lumber
right.
recently quadrupled, so that's been a lot. Steel has gone up maybe 5 to 7%. Everything has gone up, especially in 2021, especially after COVID. It's been a lot.
Okay. How are you guys identifying your perfect customer? That, I mean, you said that some of them don't even know about the retrofit. How are you going about connecting with them?
Luckily, right now, we're reaching out to all of our existing clientele for the retrofitting, spreading the word, any which way we can, webinars, newsletters, just calling them to inform them if they have not heard yet. So we've been doing it that way, as well as some people have organically been finding out about it. We've been writing some articles as well for certain publications. We do a lot of social media reach, LinkedIn posts, Facebook, everything we can to really market the entire new ordinance and law, as well as just reaching out to as many of our own in-house clients that we already have. So we're doing pretty much everything possible to help spread the word and see who wants to jump in on this opportunity.
Do you guys have like the ideal project that's just so easy and you know you're going to knock their socks off?
I do. Yeah, it's going to be a fourplex with a garage and a backyard with enough room to put two new units. And you take your fourplex and you turn it into a 7-unit apartment building. Beautiful.
That's awesome. I'm just curious.
Yeah, yeah.
Does there have to be a minimum square footage on that, the lot that you like to see?
Um,
Have any minimum or maximums for the lot? There are, of course, again, setback rules has to be for detached, and there's also certain rear setback rules. It can't take up, the entire space of the rear property. But we always, anything we propose to our clients, we've already done our research. We know the rules, we know the setbacks and requirements. So we only propose feasible units. We're not going to promise them a 10-story attached thing that then suddenly gets rejected. So once they're engaged with us and we're proposing something, we only propose what's feasible and what's allowed by the state and their specific jurisdiction.
Who is your perfect customer? Is it the mom and pops, or is it somebody who owns 50 apartment buildings all over Los Angeles?
Both. I would say it's equal between all of them. Whoever wants to do this, if their property has the room, the space, the minimums, we've been getting huge outreach from both.
What's been the tenants' response as you're building these? Are they pretty receptive to it either way?
so we've got to provide the tenants notice in Los Angeles, at least under a tenant habitability program or plan, rather, in order to give them an opportunity to object, and really no one has. So I would say it's either neutral or positive.
Okay. Well, so yeah, they're not minding and it's not too disruptive. How long is the process typically taking right now?
Construction will take you about 6 to 8 months, depending on whether it's attached or detached. If it's detached, we're building from the ground up. It's going to take a little bit longer. But if it's an attached unit in a tucked under spot, we're in and out in like 4 to 6 months. Very quick.
Interesting. Yeah, that is very disruptive for that amount of time if you're a tenant. But any tips on how to make them not cranky?
Luckily,
Be polite and clean, right? No, really.
And luckily, with our team specifically, we have a wonderful, all of our staff are very hands-on. We handle tenant communication and notices the entire way through. So that's also something the property owner doesn't have to worry about complaints being directed to them or just questions about the construction. Somebody in our office is available at all times, and if it's after hours or anything, we get back to you right away. So we handle all tenant communication and notices. updating on, whatever phase of construction we're on, how long left, whatever it is. We always make sure to keep our communication open during the entire process. Like David mentioned, we're always very nice. We absolutely understand that it could be a nuisance during the construction process and the noise. I single-handedly helped a lady going through some health conditions, as well as teaching a class, chemistry class, high school chemistry at 7 a.m. I helped find her a parking spot where she can move her car to every day during the process of construction, just so she could, be comfortable, not have to walk, and still get back to her class. So we'll do whatever is needed, and of course, within reason, we will do it to help the tenants during those construction phases.
Yeah, and I'll sort of piggyback on what Helen is saying. We've got a 4,000 square foot office here in Tarzana with maybe 20 people, and also, it's like pan around here a little bit. And this is one portion of our office, and we're dedicated to customer service here. I think that's one of our strong suits, that we ensure that, obviously the client is number one, and the client's client, which is the tenant, is essentially number two. So we're always working to ensure, appropriate communication, timely communication, and like I said, on the job, cleanliness. We want to leave the job clean every evening, free of debris and safe. So I think people see that and appreciate it, and that's why, we don't get much pushback.
All right. Well, this is the data-driven real estate show, so we've come to that part of the show where we have to focus on data. Some of my favorite ways to look at these, I've mentioned, are the upzoning opportunities. If you're in the community and upzoning is coming and you're there first, as we've talked about the different ways to build these, hopefully it'll trigger things. But now I had never even understood the term soft building. I didn't even know what that was until you and I started talking and I saw your presentation at AOA. And that's not in the realm of public records necessarily. So you may not know that unless you're driving around and really spot what's really appropriate. So I have investors that are doing using Property Radar to zoom out and then zoom in and see where the project is located, if there's enough room in the back, or where they might be able to replace parking for good tenant access and livability. That kind of stuff. So some of it's a little hard. Another way I like to do it is square footage of lot, and then you try to calculate a way to say, I only want the main building to be this much square footage and it's this many stories, and I want the lot to be this size. It's just a cheating way to be able to zoom in as much as possible and start looking at those opportunities. And then you can zoom in and actually look at the map. It's pretty nerdy. What other data?
Yeah, a couple of things. Yeah, I know exactly where you're going with this. So the city of Los Angeles is actually, and I think city of San Francisco and Oakland and those cities that do have an ordinance have published addresses of these soft story buildings. So you could probably take those addresses and import them into your Property Radar system to give a new attribute to your data sets.
Wow, that is amazing. That's fantastic. And all you have to do is find the address and then add it to a list if it meets the criteria. And if it's owned by mom and pops, there's a great chance that we'll have phone numbers and emails, which is awesome. So you can contact them directly in whatever way is appropriate. So I love overlaying demographic data. That's definitely my favorite. If you know the age of the building owner, maybe you can do some creative financing stuff. Maybe they own a whole portfolio and you figure out how to do some really creative stuff. Could be a lot of fun.
Sure.
What other data do you guys use in your business that people might be interested in? How are you out there beating the competition?
So that's a trade secret.
I figured.
But no, it's okay. So aside from that, what we learned early on is that we can take the information that's provided by the state and the city rather on these vulnerable buildings and sort of backwards engineer from those addresses, people's contact information, their names, their phone numbers, their addresses. We use Property Radar as well to get that kind of information. So we've just taken whatever's out there in the public domain and incorporated it into our marketing. And we've got a small telemarketing team that takes all that information and just calls people up all day and offers them, a bid.
So you're
and now that we're doing the ADU stuff, we're gonna continue on using you guys' data to find opportunities for landlords that may not have realized that they could take advantage of this rule.
I got to tell you, I don't think the word is out. I really don't. I'm still surprised how many investors are like, what? I can do this? It's like Christmas every day.
Yeah.
It's exciting to hear that you like to use the phone. So the phone is not dead in 2021.
Oh, no. Oh, no, the phone is great.
Do you like direct mail, or are there any other channels that have been really successful for you guys?
Pretty much everything. I mean, we're utilizing old school techniques of just phone and giving calls. Again, social media has been big, especially for the ADU side of it too. Whatever we can, writing articles, just getting those out there too. We wrote some, I think even early in, I think we wrote it last year. It was published maybe December or January, and that was just about retrofitting an ADUs to just slowly get the words. And then we get organic phone calls coming in because they read the story, they read the article.
Isn't that funny?
So whatever we can, and we're very fortunate to have a huge network right now of lots of clientele related to commercial real estate. They have maybe their own portfolio, as well as they work with clients who have others. Whatever we can with just networking alone as well has been very helpful.
Well,
but direct mail works.
Oh, you do?
It works.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you do a lot of work whenever you're in the neighborhood and you're already doing a project? Do you do anything around? Maybe you get a lot of questions from people being like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah. So we put signs on our building, and that on the buildings that we're working on, and that gets a lot of traffic. But no canvassing.
Well, it's hard
because the apartment owner doesn't live next door.
Right. I was going to say the commercial owner doesn't necessarily live there. The property manager might not. They're just like, I just can't be bothered. They're not going to necessarily pass that on. They don't care. So it's really smart to be able to do some research and find out where the actual owner lives. That's great. Interesting. Well, your presentation at the Apartment Owners Association, on the show notes, I definitely will link that. It is well worth the hour that you will spend listening. You have just such great pictures and case studies, and that's why I originally reached out to you. I'm going to redo the ADU quick video on how to find the opportunities in the data and the different ways to do that, and I just really appreciate it. It was really good.
Awesome.
And if they want to find out more information about retrofit and ADUs, where should they be going?
They can go to our website, apartmentadu.com, or give us a call, 1-866-NEW-ADU1. We'll always be available. You can hit the contact us through Apartment ADU. And we're also going to start doing, David and myself will be doing live weekly seminars with Q&A every week. They can register on apartmentadu.com. Register, and every week can have a live Q&A session with both of us to discuss anything ADU, specific property questions, or call us again, 866-NEW-ADU1.
I'm going to have to introduce you to somebody when we get off the air. Hopefully you guys are already very involved in the National Association of Property Management. I know I've taught at their associations before, but this is just too cool not to share. So
awesome.
Sure.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. I will make sure to put all those links in the show notes, and thanks for being here.
Of course.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for listening to the Data Driven Real Estate Podcast. You can find show notes and links to some of the resources mentioned in the show at datadrivenrealestate.com. Click that Join the Community, and you'll be forwarded to the Property Radar community, where you can ask questions about the current show and even see upcoming guests and ask questions there. We'd love to engage with you in the community, so check it out. Please don't forget to like, favorite, subscribe, and share on your favorite platform where you're listening to the show. It helps us out a great deal. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.